Okay. Well, good morning.
Well, good morning. Lovely to see
Hi.
you guys this morning.
Hi, good to see you too.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
if you're just joining us and tuning in, I just wanted to do a quick introduction before we get into our topic today. Today we're going to be talking about creating monumental shifts, and we're going to be defining that today. We're going to be looking at what maybe necessitates it in our lives and some of the indicators about what you can expect to if your life is calling you into a monumental shift. There's some key indicators of that, and then we're going to be giving you some takeaways at the end of our time. We only have 20 minutes today, so we're going to be really efficient with our time. We want to give you some tools and some takeaways that you can start to apply the minute we are done this call. And to get started, I thought I'd introduce myself. My name is Christal Duncan, and I am one of the 3 co-founders of Whole Human Coaching. I will let each of you introduce yourselves really quickly as well.
Sure.
I am Colin Kingsmill, another co-founder of Whole Human Coaching,
And you are coming to us, Colin, from
Nova Scotia,
Nova
Mahone
Scotia. I'm
Bay.
coming from
We are
Toronto.
across Canada here.
We
Yeah,
Mahone Bay,
are.
Toronto,
Yeah,
and Victoria.
that's
So
right. I am Carol Vickers, and I'm on the other side of the country where it's still dark.
It's still dark. Okay.
sorry,
So,
Carol.
and I am coming to you from Toronto. At Whole Human Coaching, we really focus on what it takes and what are the questions that we can use with our clients and help serve our clients on the path to reclaiming our humanity in life and in work. How can we approach things differently? Because we recognize that there is like a primal call that is and desire that is happening in society. We're all involved in something together. We're all in this together, whether we like it or not. And that is calling. Many of us are starting to ask ourselves, how can I reclaim elements of my humanity? Whether it's in my workplace, whether it's in my life. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you're on a path somewhere. You're in a career shift. It could be many different places. But how can we reclaim that? And so today we want to talk about creating monumental shifts. So, Carol, I'm wondering if you could help us define that for our listeners today as we dive into this.
So, a monumental shift is defined as something that is going to be significantly different in your life afterwards.
Mm.
So, the term paradigm shift was tossed around a lot earlier in a couple of decades ago, and it got overused. But what we realized is that what happens for people can be almost magical if they are willing to look at doing something very different in their lives and approaching things from a very different perspective. But first of all, you have to be able to see that there is some other perspective that's available. So you were speaking about, people finding that they are in wanting to reclaim parts of themselves in their lives. And that's often where, as coaches, we begin to see that there's something cooking, something not quite right with people. And it often brings them to a coaching conversation. Colin,
Yeah.
what do you see that has people coming?
Mm.
What do they feel when they come to you?
Well, I I think what we're seeing is an incredible shift in our world and in our society, at least here in the West. And life has become so complicated and so complex in the last 20 years since the arrival of things like social media. And our evolutionary biology hasn't caught up to all of this stuff that
True.
that is demanding our attention all day long. So I think today we're living in a pretty toxic society, whether
Mhm.
it's toxicity coming from social media or news feeds or a workplace that's still adapting to I'm not saying the end of capitalism, but there is certainly a shift,
Yeah,
a,
sure.
a
Mhm.
mega trend shift happening. So,
Yeah.
and I think the pandemic really shone a light on all of that. So
Yeah.
here we
Yes.
are, right, in November 2023, and everybody is not everybody, but a lot of people are struggling to adapt
Mm.
and navigate in this in this new world order because everything's changed, right? I
Yes.
mean, certainly like when I grew up and there were all these promises, and if you do this and this and this, and you follow this path and you follow
Yeah.
that career path, then you will have this and be this and do that. All of that is completely falling apart, I think.
Mhm.
And I don't think it matters what age category you're in,
No.
right? You can be entering the workforce just out of university and kind of scratching your head going, oh my God, what's going on?
Mhm.
Or you can be in the middle of it or at the
Yeah.
end of it, but it is strange, complex times. And
Right.
I think this idea of the challenge of adaptability and understanding and it just sense making today
Mhm.
is pushing a lot of us off of our center, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it requires a whole lot of work just to stay on center. And then
Yes.
that's not even going anywhere. That's like,
Yeah.
all right,
Mhm.
let me
Yeah.
just find
To stay the
where am I
course.
at?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
define the course, maybe. It's interesting,
Yeah.
Carol, earlier you referenced to the word paradigm, which is like,
Mm.
yeah, it's kind of something from, a decade or two ago that people would use a lot, change your paradigm. But I actually heard Bob Proctor, who passed away about a year and a half ago. But he refers to the paradigm as a system of habits and patterns that
Oh, yeah.
we fall into over and over
Mhm.
again. And
Yes.
that is, to me, really indicative of the pain of when someone
Mhm.
is at that place. They may not yet be able to name it, but there's, the patterns of, Colin, you referred to it, where it's just like when we're continually being bombarded and our
Mhm.
pattern becomes thinking that we are either victimized by the zeitgeist and we're powerless to change it. Maybe it's in a workplace. There's so much rise now. What I'm seeing so often, and it could just be the algorithms are feeding me that, so I will just say that, is just a lot of people talking about how to identify narcissism and its effects in your life, and what happens when just recognizing that if you're caught in unhealthy patterns, or
Mhm.
maybe you are actually being narcissistic in your approach as well, and just
Mm.
learning how to recognize those things is one thing, but it's one thing to recognize it. Knowledge is power, but it's only power if we actually act upon the change of it.
It's true. Yes. The visual that as you were describing the system, as Bob Proctor has described it, it's almost like a spider web.
Yeah.
Becomes something that contains us. And that's where it's difficult to recognize sometimes because it becomes familiar. So we're in
Yeah.
a familiar pattern that may not be exactly comfortable, but it's recognizable. So we repeat it over and over again.
Mhm.
And I think what happens for us is something sparks an awareness. And we all of a sudden are looking at our lives from a different lens. And when we do that, it can be really scary. It's like, whoa, what if I need to
Yeah.
change everything in
Yeah.
order
Especially
to
when you think you've
fix
been
my
in
life?
that closed loop, right?
Yes.
Not it's not even a hamster wheel, but it's like a closed loop
It
of
is. Yeah.
repetitive, like you
Mm.
say, signaling and messaging and habits and something you see a glimmer of light out of one corner and you're like, oh my God, I need to get out of this zombie apocalypse sort of wheel of
Yeah.
repetitive,
Yeah.
however you want to label it. Um, so
Christal,
how?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, and that's why we're here today because
Exactly.
one of the reasons that this conversation came up today was a conversation that we were having earlier this week, Christal,
Mhm.
when you were recognizing a pattern in your life
Yeah.
and something happened. And I wonder if you're able to describe what brought the clarity for you to know that it was time to shift.
Oh, yeah. So there's a couple things there. I think that when I mean, for me, I was just starting to feel, maybe I'd call it like a dissonance between
Mhm.
where I knew I was capable of being, that is the normal tension that we experience, I think, as humans that are trying to grow ourselves. So it's not just that normal tension. This was beyond that. This was an extreme frustration with feeling like
Mm.
everything I'm trying is not working, and I keep on repeating, I keep on pressing play and repeat and expecting different results, right? Like,
Yes.
so it's so cliche, but it really is true. And we
Mhm.
do that. And so some of the ways that I was doing that on myself, I realized was that, just settling for things, settling for
Mm.
results. I think one of the phrases that I used from Carol, we had a coach one time that would always say, all behavior makes perfect sense. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that it's good behavior. It just makes sense based on how you sense make at the
Yeah.
time. Your behavior is an outflow of that. And so for me, that was one of those behaviors, was such an expectation of disappointment in
Mhm.
different areas of my life, and realizing that I'm operating from that, almost like from a deficiency in that sometimes, like it's a defense mechanism. It's from years of surviving trauma and all those things. But that's something I was, always leaning back into.
I wanna just highlight that for a moment because I
Mhm.
think what you just said is super important to this
Yeah.
conversation. That expectation of disappointment.
Mhm.
I think that is the loop that many, many people are in. It's not gonna get better. No, this is how
Yeah.
it is. It is what
Mhm.
it is. How many
Yeah.
people say that? So we're caught in that space. We know there might be something else, but, it hasn't worked before, so why would it work now?
Right. Yeah.
So something happened, and this is what I'm trying to get to if and
Mhm.
it's not easy to identify.
Yeah.
What was the spark that allowed you to see there might be something different?
A couple things, again, but really the primary spark for me in that conversation was asking myself, where where is almost asking myself, where is the energy? And I don't mean that
Mm,
in an ethereal way. I mean, like,
yes,
what is lighting, where in this, what is lighting me up, and what is like energy vampire, people call them, or whatever you want to call it. What is causing me to I'm in a loop on a pattern that's not working? And
right.
this was in particular around areas of my business that we were talking about.
Mhm.
And I think that the full spark came realizing something. And so, I have a visual of this almost like holding two things. When we have something that's can seem so big and so monumental, we and we can think it's so much bigger than us. And how am I going to ever, how am I ever going to defeat this or get over it? Like, we can almost see ourselves in opposition. We
Mhm.
tend to perceive that I'm going to have to do as big of a counter move to lessen this.
Right.
Right. So then
Yeah.
what happens is we back down because we're like, well, I'm not up to making a full counter move to this. And
Mm.
so we negate gentler steps along the way.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
so I think that for me in that conversation, part of it was just, it was a synchronicity of the conversation, the timing,
Mhm.
that I was ready to recognize that there was a step that didn't have to be the full monumental, turn everything upside down, but there was a significant step that I could take that would
Mm.
actually shift things. And I felt the shift in me when I decided that.
Right.
But
Colin, do you
even like
recall
a
the
one,
question?
I don't recall the question actually, but what's interesting, I think, here is that a monumental shift can start with a 1 degree or a 2 degree
Exactly.
pivot, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's where you got
Exactly.
to the other day,
Hmm.
where you don't have to go and sort of, I don't know, become the next Nobel Peace Prize winner, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
But what you do is you stop telling yourself those stories that are holding you
Exactly.
back,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
You decide that that's a narrative that is no longer serving you. You decide,
Mm.
you make a decision about the stories you're telling yourself in your head. You decide which ones are serving you,
Hmm.
because some of them might still, right?
Yeah.
And which
Mhm.
ones aren't, right?
Yes.
And when you decide which ones aren't, you say, I'm not going to listen to those stories anymore. They're often self-limiting beliefs,
Hmm.
right? They're
Mhm.
often connected to something way in the past, right? That is no
Mhm.
longer serving you. That's no longer your current life, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So 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 when we talk about monumental change, it is stop stop telling yourself those stories, or at least recognize what they are, decide which
Mhm.
ones to use,
Yeah.
make that small pivot, because that 1 or 2 degrees on your journey is going to be very large
Mhm.
in a very short space of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the trick or the tool that we're telling people
Exactly.
is stop, recognize,
Mm-hmm.
what are acknowledge what are the stories,
Mm-hmm.
and then go from there.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we all work on is this idea of a leadership toolkit, which is, where's the destination that you want to get to? And if you use
People.
navigation, it's like, what are the coordinates that you want to get to in your life? Even
Mm-hmm.
2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Don't go long term, because everything's changing so quickly, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what are your values? What are your needs? I think part of this societal thing that we were talking about earlier is we have forgotten what our needs are.
Yeah.
What our values are.
Yeah.
What nourishes me. You spoke about, I think, the energy, but I often speak about a fuel tank, right? How much resources are you spending on that?
Right.
And what's your personal brand? So
Yes.
monumental shift starts with a small pivot and a design. I think it has to have a design
Right.
to it,
Right.
so that you are not a recipient of other people's designs. You are charting your course.
You're creating your own system. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's a couple of pieces in there that I think are really useful for those of you who are watching to take away. And that's that it is not, you don't have to change everything. That there's a term in navigation, in sailing, is called trim tabbing. And if you think of a giant ocean liner, what has a giant ocean liner turn is initially a very small action.
Oh.
So the first thing, if you're considering that maybe, hey, you know what Christal was describing is my life. I'm stuck. I'm feeling like my expectation is that I'm going to be disappointed. That's great news. And it doesn't sound like it right now, but it is, because that's the recognition. And once you have that recognition, then you can take a small action. And the small action is really what you were saying, Colin. What are you dreaming of?
Yeah.
So it's journaling, it's writing down, it's creating a mind map, it's creating that vision board that gives you something to be looking towards. So the question is, what are you dreaming about? Or I think an even more powerful one is, what were you dreaming about when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What did you let go of?
And I think some of the pressures of our society and a lot of self-help books and gurus and the big coaches out there, they'll put a big shiny object up on the wall and with 3 phrases and say, do this, right? So what we're saying is, okay, that's great. That's your vision. That's your dream. What you have to do, though, is break that down into smaller bite-sized chunks and smaller pivots and smaller pieces. I think so often our society gives us this big, bright, shiny object to go towards, but they don't tell us how to break it down into bite-sized nuggets that I can do and I can change and I can be every day. I think that's really important to add to this idea of monumental shift is not about, changing your whole life tomorrow. It's where are you going and what are the I forget the navigational metaphor, but what are the milestone markers that you need to connect with to get to that final destination?
But I do want to point out that the shift actually does occur. And that's what makes it so amazing, is that after you have considered that, there is a place where you will always be looking back to what it was.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll be able to see now more clearly what is ahead. So, Christal, I know we're down to a very short moment. But what was the one thing that you took away from the conversation that you and Colin and I had that is different now as you stand here today?
The thing from that particular conversation was the fact that I made a decision. Yeah, I made a decision, and that's a kind of a time-honored principle of life and of how we can move forward. Is I made a decision and I started to follow through on that decision, and it was not a decision that was going to really change anybody else's life, but I know at the core that by following through on this decision, it changes my life and it changes everything going forward because it's freeing
Right.
up things.
Wow.
I think that we often think about we need to add more, but
Mhm.
really maybe it's about letting go. It's really more about letting
Mm.
go than adding
Yeah.
more stuff into our lives.
Right.
So that for me was what that meant. It was a letting go, a decision to let something
Wow.
go. Mhm.
Fabulous. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Mhm. Yeah.
And look at all the fuel now you have because you let go of that old story, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah. So
now
true.
that energy that you were speaking about, you can spend it on the future and not on the past,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we were talking about that 1 degree, if you think about 1 degree at the focus, it's barely discernible. But as
Mhm.
1 degree gets further and further and further away, it actually becomes a much bigger, it actually does grow in size. So
Mhm.
never do not underestimate the power of those choices that you make for yourself and those
Mhm.
decisions that you make and the power of sticking to them.
Yeah. So if
Mhm.
we were to sum it up, it's recognize where you are,
Mhm.
and if it feels like it isn't a great place to be, recognize and celebrate that. That's
Yeah.
good news,
Yeah.
because from there, you get to be able to see what is that pivot point? What is that 1%
Exactly.
change you're going to be able to identify and put into place? And you
The
can
nice
start
thing
today.
about that is you recognize that you're at a departure port, right?
Mm.
As
Mhm.
opposed to staying in town. I guess
Yes.
if we're using the navigational
Yeah.
metaphors,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
got out
you're
of
leaving.
town, you're at the port, and you're
Yep.
about to set sail.
Yeah.
Raise the
So
anchor.
yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Wow.
Well,
Awesome.
thank you for thanks for joining me today, Colin and Carol. And thank you
No,
if
thank
you
you.
have stuck around with us. We hope that this has not only been useful for you, but that you're actually going to walk away from this and you're going to ask yourself bigger and bolder questions, more beautiful questions. If you want to create some monumental shifts, what are some of those 1 degree changes that you can make right now?
Mm.
So until we see you again, we just wish you great health and peace. And we hope that you continue to reclaim your humanity along with us. Thanks for joining us.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.